L'chaim v'livracha, to life and for blessings. Okay, welcome, folks. Welcome, everybody. Yes, indeed. Welcome, everybody. Words matter. Why? Because once they left you, they make an impact on another. They affect another for good and hopefully for even better. They can make a person's day, your wonderful words, or they could be crushing and destroy a person's day. That's the power that we have. Why do we have such a power? Where do we gain that from? Really? That can have such a profound effect? How do we understand that? Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zirchen Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We continue in the 7th chapter, understanding the power of Creator within creation. Well, if we understand ourselves, there's the core essence of our soul. There is the 10 powers of our soul, 3 intellectual, 7 emotional. And then there is my speech, which expresses, of course, my actions do, but primarily speech, which expresses my soul. So we have above likewise. I mean, the opposite. We are like above. We have those 3 dimensions. Well, because there's those 3 dimensions in the divine. There's the way God is beyond, the essence, if you will, or let's just say beyond. Soiviv, as he encompasses everything equally, transcends all of creation, and creation including the spiritual realm, not just the physical world. And then there is the limited aspect of God as he's found in his kindness, his gevura, his strength of refrain, holding back. And then there is the expression of God, of all of that, expressing, which is by the word of God, by the breath of his mouth. And that's how the Torah teaches us the world came into being. 10 utterances. Bereshit being the first in the beginning, all encompassing. Then Vehi or, let there be light, and so on. So it's the breath of his mouth that brings the verbalization, the creative power, that if it were without contraction, then it would be worlds that are limitless in quality and in quantity. Why? Because God's speech, his word, is bound up with him as one. Whereas by me, it's not. By you, it's not. So, for example, when we say a word of kindness, The motivator for that is the feeling of kindness that we have. But the feeling of kindness propels us to express kindness. But they're not one and the same thing, or they're not bound together in a perfect unity. As opposed to the divine kindness brings to an expression of kindness, meaning it's enclosed in it. They're one. God, he and his attributes are one. And therefore, when he expresses it, likewise, it is one. So the attributes of God, 10 divine attributes, are one with the infinite of God, right? And that's enclosed in the word of God. It's enclosed, meaning it's not just merely a cause for the expression like it is by us. The kindness that we have is causing us to speak kindness, but it actually then becomes bound up and with it. And as a result, the world is built through God's kindness, meaning that chesed vests itself in malchus. And malchus is the word of God, the breath of his mouth. It's the vessel that contains in it, right? The vessel that contains malchus, the word of God, is the vessel that contains in it the kindness of God. Okay. So like a snail whose garment is an integral component of his body, likewise the word of God and the breath of his mouth is the life force that emanates, that it is like the snail, right? You have, so if you will, the cover of the snail is like the vessel, right? And then there's the snail itself. So in the metaphor over here, you have the malchus, which is the word of God, right? As a king rules with his word. It's the vessel. It's the garment of the snail, right? The vessel of the snail that contains in it the snail. They're one and the same thing. So likewise, Malchus, the word of God, is enclosed in it the kindness of God, the attribute of God, of his kindness, that they're one and the same, right? Now, this is not just with the 10 utterances that are mentioned in Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, but as we've learned previously, when you take those words, those letters, and you make a combination. So if you will take, for example, the aleph of light, and you take the shin of shemesh, of sun, you put aleph and shin together. So these are now what we call a combination. You're combining letters, right, that are not written there in Genesis. You're combining it. And that just shows that this is a greater tzimtzum contraction on the word of God that's animating the outcome of this, which is Aish, fire, right? Or you have what's called Tmura. Tmura means substitution. So, for example, Aleph is the first letter. You can substitute it with the last letter, Tough. Base, second letter, you can substitute with the second last letter, Shin. Or there's another ways of substitution, as we've actually expressed previously. All guttural sounds of letters, you can substitute one for the other. So, Echad, you have the ches, is a guttural sound, right? It's a guttural sound. You can exchange it for an ayin, which is also a guttural sound, the letter, and you can substitute it. So we have from echad, the oneness of God, to va'ed, for the eternity of God in those letters, as we spoke about actually in chapter 1 a while back. And then there's, of course, cheshbon, which means the math of it, the gematria, the numeric value. So you can take numeric value of something, of for instance, well, we'll have it soon, of God's name, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the way it's spelled out, the numeric value, and it's 45 or 50. Sorry, there's 45, there's 52, there's 63 and 72, and spelling out the tetragrammaton. And it's the numeric value. In other words, it's not the letter itself, not the word itself. It's the numeric value, which shows even a greater contraction, a greater come down of the divine life force that's animating that which is animating. All of this is letters that are uttered, that are pronounced and uttered by God to be the life force of that which it creates. Right. So, and these words of God that are malchus, right? Coming from malchus, malchus being royalty, royalty being the king who rules with his word, becomes the life force that vested in it is God's kindness, vested in such a way that it's bound up in one with it, not um, not a cause for creation, but through that expression, kindness is, God's kindness is engaged and building the world. Right? Different than the human being. Kindness propels me, motivates me to give charity. It's a motivator. When you're giving the charity, it's the act that you're doing. Yes, it's an act of kindness, but the feeling, the act is kind. The feeling, though, the emotion was separated in that act. And the proof is because you could do the act and maybe not even express a feeling. That's a proof that it's not really bound up. The emotion not bound up with the act. Doesn't have to, I mean, it could be, but doesn't necessitate that it would be. But by God, it is. Because Malchus is the vessel that contains chesed. Royalty, the word of God, is a vessel that contains the kindness of God. So it's his kindness that's building the world. It's expressed through the word of God. Kind of deep, Kabbalistic, but, through this we are gaining a greater awareness of the power of God within creation. L'chaim v'libracha. To life and for blessing. And what greater thing is there for life and for blessing than us coming together daily to learn Tanya? L'chaim.
W2 a blessed number?
I don't know. Blessed number? Yeah. I don't know if it's a blessed number. It's a special number, maybe. I don't see questions. So let me share the following. Today's July 4th. 83 years ago on this day, which falls out on the Jewish calendar then and today, the 28th of Sivan, Chavches, Koyach of Sivan, the month of Sivan. It is on this day that our dear Rebbe and Rebbitzin, Chayamushka, came to the shores of America. 1941, the last passenger boat that made it out of Europe safely to America. Very significant day. So, on a simple level, the significance is that on this day, the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin were saved from Nazi Germany, Yamach Shemam. May their name be obliterated. And we're saved literally. It's quite miraculous. Very fascinating story in and of itself. But as the Rebbe spoke, and what this became in significance is not just that the Rebbe left, the hell of Europe, of war-torn Europe, of the ultimately what would become of a third of the Jewish people, Lycia. But it's where he came to is perhaps even more important. Is to go out of a bad place is very important. But equally and actually more important is the good space that you go into. The Rebbe came to America, which is called Chetzi Kader Atachton, the lower hemisphere. Lower because if you take a globe and you put Eretz Yisrael on top of the globe, on the bottom half of the globe, guess where we are in America? The lower half. And Israel is the upper half. At the center point of the world, it is on top of the world. Not the northern, not the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere. That's all, if you take a globe, that's all arbitrary. I mean, the equator is not arbitrary, but well, yeah, in a sense. But the what's up and what's down is, in any case, coming to the low part of the world, so as we've learned so many times, Chassidus, the whole point why we're here is to make a dir b'tachtonin, to make a dwelling place for God in this low world. So in this low physical world, the lowest of the low is the lower hemisphere. I mean, think about it. Historically, if you put Eretz Yisrael on top of the world, everywhere where Jews lived until the last 150 years, let's say, or 100 years just, vast majority of Jews lived, 2-hour flight, 3-hour flight from Israel, not a 10-hour flight, 2-3-hour flight from Israel. That's where all Jews lived. And then all of a sudden, the vast majority are on the lower hemisphere. So that's where we are. That's where the Jews are. And as you want to create a home for God, how do you uplift a home? From the bottom. Leverage, got to take a lever and leverage from the bottom. So this is the bottom of the world, and therefore this is where the Rebbe comes to uplift this world. Whereas the previous Rebbe said, America is nicht anders, America is not different. The Rebbe said, yes, America is different. Previous Rebbe said America is not different coming from Europe. In other words, just as in Europe, you had Yiddishkeit flourishing, so you'll have in America. The Rebbe said, no, 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 no. America is different. And he didn't say those words. In a sense, he's saying that it's different. It's different because of the lowness, so therefore it needs to be picked up from the lowest part in order to elevate all of this, the rest of the physical world and the spiritual worlds above, even the world of Atzilus. Hold on 1 second.
The roof is leaking.
Yeah.
Where the buckets are.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. And therefore the Rebbe comes here. So he wasn't just getting about out of a bad place called torn Europe, a Holocaust, but he was coming to a place to create the marching orders that we are going to transform this world and to bring the final redemption. And the only way you can do that is from the bottom up. What does it mean, the bottom up? What does it mean, bottom up? That means from the lowest point, from within. And there's so much more to talk about this. Another time we'll have fun bringing about it. But that's who we are and what we are. L'chaim. Jeff is asking an excellent question. Is there a link between 7 days of the week and the 7 divine emotional attributes? Absolutely, there is. Absolutely. Excellent question. There is. I'm trying to remember if that's going to be the next chapter. Oh, we'll fit that all in. Yeah. Jeff, you can have a little patience. It's coming. Hold on. It's coming. We're going to get there. Okay. So instead of giving the forthcoming class, but absolutely, just briefly, the notion that there's 7 days a week is like a ridiculous thing. 7? Like, where would 7 come from? Why would anybody do that? Like, why would it, why would people come together and create a week of 7 days? Like, 10 is a whole number, a complete number, a divisible number. 7? Do you know why? Because in fact, God created the world in 7 days. I mean, 6 days and 7th day he rested, but there's 7-day cycle. Like, isn't there not a greater testament to the fact that everybody has 7 days of the week, that this is coming from the fact that God is creator? Just if anybody has an argument against that, I'd like to hear. And you can't even say, like, the Jews imposed this upon the world. How would they have done that when the Torah was given in the year 2448? Like, for almost 2,500 years, what? They were making 10-day weeks. They were making 5-day weeks, right? Seven isn't like doesn't isn't like even a into 350 you know to 365 days a year. Seven doesn't divide into that. Five does, but seven doesn't. So you can't be that. It doesn't divide into the month, right? So why? Because God created the world, and that's what my belief is. All right, Jeff. I'm glad that I'm going to help you become more patient. I'm glad that I'm going to be a party to that. Just a reminder today, TRC at 4 p.m. Those involved in TRC, where we get more into things, more personal growth, which is like, wow, phenomenal. Anybody that is interested in it, please private message me if you'd like to be a part. Okay. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine coming to you from Chabad Zurich Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have an amazing, great day, and stay tuned for Rambam.